I am Craig Ebert, President of the Climate Action Reserve. On behalf of our staff and the Board of Directors of the Climate Action Reserve, I want to welcome all of you to our special 20th anniversary North American Carbon World. This is our second year in a row back in Anaheim. It's great to see so many of you, and I think this is the first time in our history that we've actually had to cap registration, and to me that's a reflection of interest in the global market right now, and absolutely, and a reflection of where we need to go from here. As I was reviewing my notes from last year's conference, it occurred to me that in some respects I could say the same things, make the same points, and I say that as it's hardly a cause for celebration. It is not. To me, it's a reflection of how slowly, perhaps, we're all addressing this crisis. And as I was thinking about how to subtitle this, I wasn't sure whether the subtitle should be, "How Stupid Can Humanity Be?" Or maybe more accurately, "Let's Not Let Perfection Be the Enemy of the Good." Unfortunately, it does appear that we are doing just that. As I said last year, and I'll say it again, we do live in an ever-changing world, but the climate crisis, while it's a constant, it also unfortunately happens to be an ever constantly escalating problem. And we're only exacerbating that situation by what I would consider inaction. And to me, that's sort of the byword from what we've been dealing with. If any of you noticed, on Monday, the IPCC released its 6th annual synthesis report on climate change, and the results are sobering, and I just wanted to share with you some of the updated information. Now, this is, I believe, the first synthesis report since 2014. I may have that date wrong, but the IPCC strives to pull together all of the relevant information for us lay people to understand what we're dealing with. And there's some obvious takeaways. We all should know, that human activity is unequivocally changing our global climate system, and not for the better. The magical level that we're all told we have to keep warming under is 1.5 degrees C. We're already at 1.1, and the trajectory is upward. Even when we look at that average annual global increase of over 1.1 and heading towards 1.5, some stark realities are staring us in the face. Those impacts are higher over land than they are over the oceans, and they're even more pronounced over higher latitudes than towards the equatorial belt. And we're all well aware of the effects that we're witnessing on a daily basis. The clock is ticking in a big way. So in terms of what did the IPCC call for? What type of action are they demanding from us? They are, not surprisingly, demanding immediate large-scale reductions across the world to limit warming to that 1.5 degree level. Let's put that in context. Emissions are supposed to peak by 2025, cut by 60% by 2035, and for the developed countries, they've rolled back their target for achieving net zero from 2050 to 2040. They attached a very low probability to that outcome. Who are they kidding? It's a zero probability, given where we're going right now. We are going to blast through that 1.5 degrees centigrade mark. Arguably, we already have. I just gave you what we need to do to prevent that. I would like to think there's no one in the room that given the trajectory we're on, that we're even going to come close to that. That is not a cause for hopelessness. It's a demand for action. It's an indication of just how serious this problem is. And to put this in context, just a couple of things, little factoids on what's going on around the world right now. The U.S. just approved the Willow Project for additional oil and gas development on the North Slope in Alaska. China's building 62 more coal plants, another one coming online every day. That is not to point the finger at either one of them. That's not the purpose. I've said before, and I'll say it again, if anybody wants to know who's responsible for this crisis, look in the mirror. We all are responsible. We're all contributing, perhaps in varying ways, but we're responsible for the contribution, and we're responsible for addressing it. And that's why I think inaction defines the day. It's a daunting challenge on so many levels. And what we're seeing is that the global commitment is not there. And why do I say that? And again, I realize that this has a real depressing quality to it. But none of you are here because you don't think that we can address this. But let's put this in context of what our global hopes are riding on in terms of international commitments to address climate change, specifically on the COP process that's been underway for way too long now. If you add up the sum total of the nationally determined commitments, we're going to hit 2.8 degrees centigrade by 2100. That's actually higher than what their estimate was last year. And that's assuming that all of those NDCs are fully implemented. The sad reality is those NDCs at the moment largely represent hot air. They're just bombastic statements by governments at COP to indicate what they intend to do. It's certainly a debatable proposition where each country is along that trajectory. And as we've seen time and again in like the United States, it's an on-again, off-again focus on addressing the climate crisis. And unfortunately, too much of it is off again rather than on again. Yes, there are hopeful signs, and we have to embrace that, but that's not where we are today. And the reality of it is, the sad reality is that governments are failing to address this problem. I walked out of, you may have heard me say this before, I walked out of COP23 in Kyoto thinking, COP3, that's part of the problem. The numbers have gotten too large. But COP3 in Kyoto, I thought, and many of us did, that was the beginning of the end of this problem. It seemed like for all of its challenges, the global community was addressing this problem. Well, we all know what's transpired since then. In many ways, Kyoto fell flat on its face, and now we're going into COP28. 28? Are you kidding me? The science on this has been compelling for decades. So it's not as if we don't know what the challenges are. What we have is an unwillingness to address it. Another unfortunate factoid, rightfully so, the developing world is demanding funds from the richer countries to help them develop on a more sustainable path and also to adapt to the ravages of climate change. Paris, back in 2015, set up the Green Fund, which is supposed to provide $100 billion a year in funding to the developing world. We're still not there. We're still not there at $100 billion. You know what $100 billion is for this problem? A drop in the bucket. As we're seeing, that and just the China case exhibits it, but it's a story that repeats itself across the planet. Developing countries are not on a sustainable development path in terms of adopting these low-carbon technologies, many of which are cost-effective. There's a whole host of reasons why that's the case that I won't get into now, but that's a sobering takeaway as well. To me, and this comes from a person who, I've got a public policy background, I've committed my career to working in the public sector and working with governments at the regional, national, and international level. They're failing us. They're not delivering on what we're expecting of them. And I wish it weren't true, but sadly it is. What's the ray of hope here? Well, I think into that void steps the voluntary carbon market for a variety of reasons, but not the least of which, it's the private sector that can mobilize the capital, the trillions of dollars of capital that's going to be needed to address this crisis. And I know many of you here share that objective today. That's your mission as well. The amount of creativity, the amount of funding that can go into this is poised to tackle this problem. And what we need to is unleash that capital and make a difference, and make that difference now. But again, the reality of it is those incentives are not fully there. And for a variety of reasons, the capital remains on the sidelines as the earth burns. Why is a good question. I'll just pose that and ask each of you to think about it. The few hopeful signs, I think, over the past year have been some of the international efforts to try to define the principles for moving forward. Efforts like the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market or the Voluntary Carbon Market Initiative. I and many of you in this room have been active in those efforts, and we're certainly hoping that the guidance that comes from those efforts It changes the equation that I just summarized. Let's all keep our fingers crossed and let's see what they come up with. And just to put that in context, both the ICVCM and the VCMI will be releasing their guidance by the end of this month. And I encourage everyone to examine exactly what messages they're telling all of us and indicating what pathways they are or are not providing for moving forward. And I think an important way to think about this is as I think many of you know, there is a global marginal abatement cost curve out there for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We could debate how steep that curve is, but it's huge. Huge opportunities out there to reduce the trajectory we're currently on. And I think we can all approach it and understand that the concepts like core carbon principles is something all of us can and should embrace. We need those guideposts for mitigation actions worldwide, and we're certainly hopeful that these international efforts are going to deliver that. The challenge, I think, for those core carbon principles, or the CCPs as they're being called, is it going to allow all of you in this room to tap into that global mitigation cost curve, or is it going to limit it to some slice of that pie? As I said, I've been active in this, and I'm not going to go into what the conclusions of that effort might be. We're all still awaiting the publication. But one of the evolutionary developments I've seen in recent years is a focus on treating what some people call supply chain mitigation or value chain mitigation or insetting, essentially a company's Scope 3 emissions as the main area of focus. Absolutely no reason why a company should not consider what they can do about their supply chain impacts. They definitely should. But that shouldn't be a limiting factor. That's basically saying take that global marginal abatement cost curve and you only get to look at a slice of that primarily. And that's the slice that affects your particular company's operations. And the reality of it is whatever might be one company's insets is another company's offsets. Insetting is nothing more than a subset of global offsetting opportunities, and that's the way it should be viewed. I think another challenge around that insetting, and we've seen the developments with announcements that we need to develop, Scope 3 guidance, is I find it exasperating. We've been working on guidance for accounting and directions for how many decades now? Do we really need to hit pause on the clock and say, all right, let's take time out now to develop another set of guidance for companies on how they should pursue supply chain reductions? Many of you have been working on improving guidance in the offsetting market for a very long time. And we continue to work every day on a continuous improvement process. There are many valuable lessons to be learned from that, and those lessons should be the building block for what everyone's being asked to do globally. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We don't have the time for that. And fundamentally, that goes back to the point that we need that action now. Not next year, not 5 years from now, not 10 years from now. We need it now. And we need to recognize that in some people's minds, we're going to make mistakes along the way. Companies will. But castigating companies for, in your estimation, doing something wrong doesn't help anybody out. Winning debating points doesn't help anybody out. In the voluntary market, companies will not commit capital on a voluntary basis only to be accused of greenwashing for what many of us would view as credible efforts. That's not to say we should remain silent in the face of shortfalls. Quite the contrary. Our mindset needs to change from criticizing what might have been done and why it came up short to saying, here's how you could do it better next time, but keep investing. Invest more. Companies, if you think about it, getting up into the C-suites around the world, the amount of capital we're asking companies to commit, it's not going to resonate very well at that C-suite level if the takeaway is, wait a minute, you want us to invest how many millions per year? And I've got protesters outside saying I'm doing it wrong. And again, that's not to discourage the investors, but at the end of the day, We can't let these chicken little critics impede action on climate change, and that's exactly what they're doing now. They are letting perfection be the enemy of the good. We need to support these well-intentioned voluntary or compliance corporate efforts, continue to fine-tune the direction we're going in, but demand action now, get that capital off the sidelines, and invest in this problem. Now, we need action. And that's where the hope is. The people in this room, all of you are committed to action. That's why you're here. That's what you do on a daily basis. I know you've got an endless supply of ideas. I get emails and phones every day with more ideas for us to consider, and that's fabulous. Keep up that thinking. Keep up the good work. I know you're here to learn, to collaborate, to work with others. Enjoy our 20th anniversary NACW. And when you leave here, rejuvenate and accelerate the actions that you're involved in. We can leave this world a better, safer place for the generations to come, and it starts with each and every one of us in this room. Thank you.